The teller's words hit me like a slap across the face. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harrison, but we can't process this withdrawal today." I stood there in the marble lobby of Pinnacle Bank, my hand flat on the counter, staring at the name tag that read Jennifer as if it might suddenly start making sense. $500. That's what I was asking for. 500 from an account I'd built over 15 years, watching every deposit like it was liquid gold. And this 23-year-old woman with highlighted hair and a forced smile was telling me no. But that moment in the bank lobby, that wasn't the beginning. It was the ending, the culmination of something much darker that had been festering beneath the surface of my life for months. Let me take you back to where it all started, back when I still believed the world worked on merit and fairness, back when I didn't know what it meant to be erased. My name is Marcus Harrison. I'm a CEO, was anyway. Built a tech consulting firm from nothing in 2008, right when the economy was collapsing and everyone said I was insane. 30 people in a cramped office on the 5th floor of a building with water stains on the ceiling. 15 years later, we were turning over $90 million a year, had contracts with Fortune 500 companies, and I'd made the Forbes 40 Under 40 list twice. I drove a Range Rover, lived in a 4-bedroom colonial in the suburbs, and every morning I woke up thinking, I did this. Me, a black kid whose father worked at the post office and whose mother cleaned houses. I made it. My wife, Stephanie, was beautiful in that effortless way. Tall, caramel skin, always wore her hair natural, always smelled like lavender. We met at a networking event in 2012. She was working in HR at a pharmaceutical company back then. I remember thinking she had the kind of laugh that made other people want to laugh too. We married 3 years later, quiet ceremony at the Botanical Gardens, just family and close friends. She quit her job when I asked her to. "Let's build this together," I'd said. "I need you by my side." She agreed. Within a year, she was handling our social media, planning events, making sure the company looked good. I paid her a salary, $70,000 a year, which felt generous at the time. Felt like I was taking care of her. Our house sat on 2 acres in Westchester County. There was a pool, a tennis court we never used, a kitchen with an island the size of my first apartment. Every Sunday, Stephanie would cook jerk chicken, rice and peas, plantains, the food she grew up eating in her parents' home in Kingston. Her mother, Gloria, would come over, and the 3 of us would eat while watching the game or whatever show was trending. Gloria was the kind of woman who said what she thought, and what she thought was usually that I worked too much. "Marcus," she'd say, shaking her head, "a man who doesn't know his wife is a man who's about to lose her." I'd laugh it off. Stephanie would squeeze my hand under the table. Everything felt solid. The first strange thing happened on a Tuesday in March. I came home early, one of those rare days when a meeting got canceled, and Stephanie jumped when I walked in. She was on the couch with her laptop, and she shut it so quickly that I heard the snap of the lid closing from the hallway. "Hey," I said, kissing the top of her head. She smelled different. Not bad, just different. New perfume, maybe. "Working on something?" I asked. "Just email stuff," she said, not meeting my eyes. Boring company business. But we didn't have a company anymore. She'd stopped doing the social media work 6 months prior when she said it was taking too much time. I didn't think about it then. I was closing a $40 million deal with a logistics company. My head was elsewhere. The second thing was smaller but weirder. I asked her to transfer some money between accounts. I was consolidating things, trying to get organized. And she said she couldn't because I'd need to go in person. I asked why. She said the bank had some new policy about large account changes. I didn't push it. I had an assistant. I had accountants. I had people whose job it was to worry about money details while I focused on strategy and vision. The third thing was the phone. One morning, Stephanie left her phone on the kitchen counter while she showered. It buzzed. I wasn't snooping, I swear to God, but I glanced at it. The notification said, "Meeting confirmed, 2 p.m., Starbucks on Madison." There was no name, just a phone number I didn't recognize. I felt something cold move through my chest, but I told myself to stop being paranoid. People met for coffee all the time. Why wouldn't my wife? I didn't ask her about it. I told myself I was being that guy, the insecure, controlling man. I didn't want to be that guy. By April, there were other things. She started taking calls in the bedroom with the door closed. She asked me about my passwords, not directly, but in that careful way, asking if I'd ever shared them with anyone, if I remembered what they all were. She wanted to help manage things. She spent a lot of time on her phone, her thumb moving in that unconscious scroll, scroll, scroll. When I'd come up behind her, she'd lock the screen so fast I'd hear the click. I should have asked questions. I should have demanded answers. But I was a man who had never had to demand anything, because everything had always come to me. Success, respect, love. I'd earned them, or thought I had. The idea that something was wrong, that something was being taken, didn't fit into the story I told myself about my life. So I pushed the feeling down, deep into a place where I didn't have to look at it. On a Thursday in late April, I decided to surprise her. I left work at 3 o'clock, told my team I had a doctor's appointment, which was a lie, and drove home to pick her up early, thinking we could have dinner somewhere nice, somewhere without screens or conversation about market share. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed her car was there, but so was another car, a silver Mercedes I didn't recognize, the kind of car that costs more than most people's houses. And there, parked right next to it, was a feeling I'd never had before, the certain knowledge that everything was about to change. I stood in the lawyer's office on Madison Avenue, 3 thick folders spread across the mahogany desk in front of me, and watched Richard Castellano, the most expensive divorce attorney in Manhattan, lean back in his chair with an expression that said he'd seen worse, but not often. "How long have you known?" he asked, his fingers steepled together, silver cufflinks catching the afternoon light. "Since March," I said. My voice came out steady, which surprised me. But I didn't have proof until last week. Richard opened the first folder. Inside were bank statements, pages and pages of them, each one marked with a highlighter. Transactions to accounts I'd never heard of. Wire transfers on dates when Stephanie had told me she was at her mother's house in New Jersey. Deposits from shell companies with names like Meridian Holdings and Crescent Capital Management. $47,000 in March alone, $112,000 in April. "These are the household accounts," Richard said, tapping the papers with a pen. "The ones you had joint access to, correct?" I nodded. "I've been too busy to watch them closely." I trusted her. "And these?" He opened the second folder. These were different, printouts from accounts I'd never seen before. Accounts opened in Stephanie's name only, with passwords and PINs scrawled on notepads that I'd found in her desk drawer. $3,470,000. Moved, piece by piece, over the course of 18 months, from our company's operating accounts into these hidden pools. She'd done it slowly enough that our accountant, my accountant, a man I'd trusted for 7 years, hadn't noticed, or hadn't said anything. "How is this possible?" I heard myself ask. "I have alerts on the company accounts. Large transfers require my signature." Richard exchanged a look with his paralegal, a young woman named Christine who sat in the corner taking notes. "Your wife didn't move the money herself," he said quietly. "She had help, professional help. These signature blocks here." He pointed to a stack of documents in the second folder. "These are forged. Excellent forgeries, expensive forgeries, the kind that cost money and require connections." My chest tightened. "Who?" "That's what we need to find out," Richard said. "But there's something else." He opened the third folder, and my stomach dropped before I even saw what was inside. Photographs, real estate listings, a deed to a property in the Cayman Islands, signed with my name, a signature I'd never made. Another deed, this one for a brownstone in Brooklyn, also in my name. And then a video file, burned to a USB drive, labeled with a date from 2 weeks ago. "What is this?" I asked. "I'd rather show you," Richard said. He plugged the USB into his laptop and turned the screen toward me. The video was security footage from the lobby of Pinnacle Bank. Timestamp, 2:15 p.m., 2 weeks prior. The camera showed the marble lobby, the teller stations, and there, unmistakably, was Stephanie, standing at the customer service desk with a man I recognized immediately. Marcus Chen, my CFO, my right hand, the man I'd promoted 6 months ago, the man I'd given a $2 million bonus to last Christmas, the man who'd been with the company since we had 15 employees. On the screen, I watched Marcus hand Stephanie a folder. I watched her open it, check the contents, and smile. Then I watched her lean across the desk and kiss him on the mouth, right there in the lobby, in broad daylight, with security cameras running. "There's more," Richard said. He pulled up another file, an email chain between Stephanie and Marcus, dating back 8 months. Love notes mixed in with financial jargon. Plans, references to the timeline, when we can access the accounts, the signature templates. And then, in an email from 3 months ago, a line that made my throat close up. "Once we have enough, we disappear. He'll spend the rest of his life trying to figure out what happened." I couldn't breathe. The room tilted slightly, and I gripped the edge of the desk. "Mr. Harrison," Richard said, his voice gentler now. "I've been doing this for 28 years. This is coordinated financial fraud on a significant scale. Your wife and Mr. Chen appear to have been planning this since at least last summer. The forged signatures, the shell accounts, the offshore properties. This suggests legal counsel. Someone helped them set this up. Someone good." "How much?" I managed to ask. "Best estimate? $4.8 million. Possibly more once we dig into the overseas accounts." I closed my eyes. 4.8 million. More than my first business made in 10 years. Money I'd earned. Money I'd built. Gone. Moved piece by piece into the accounts of a woman who'd smiled at me over breakfast this morning and asked if I wanted fresh squeezed orange juice. "There's one more thing," Richard said. "And this is the part that makes it worse. Your CFO has a contact in the banking world. A senior manager at Pinnacle Bank named Douglas Webb. Webb was the one who created the accounts, who facilitated the transfers, who looked the other way when the signatures didn't match. In exchange, your wife promised him a share of the proceeds. $50,000, according to the email correspondence." "Douglas Webb," I repeated. The name meant nothing to me, but suddenly it meant everything. He was the one who denied my $500 withdrawal. He was the one who'd treated me like I was trying to rob my own bank. He was the one who'd looked at my ID, looked at the signature on the withdrawal slip, and decided that something about me, about a black man in a custom suit trying to access his own money, didn't add up. I stood up. My legs felt strange beneath me, like they belonged to someone else. "I need to go," I said. "Mr. Harrison, we should talk strategy," Richard began, but I was already moving toward the door. "I know what I need to do," I said. "I need to talk to my wife." The drive home took 45 minutes. I drove with the windows down, even though it was cold, trying to breathe, trying to think. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. The house looked the same as it always did, beautiful, peaceful, a monument to a life that had been a lie. Stephanie was in the kitchen. She'd changed out of her clothes and into yoga pants and one of my old college sweatshirts. She was chopping vegetables, red peppers, onions, mushrooms, and there was a bottle of wine open on the counter. She looked up when I came in, and I saw her face change in the space of a second. The smile died. Her hand tightened on the knife. "Marcus," she said, "you're home early." "Yes," I said, "I am." I pulled out my phone and played the video. I held it up so she could see the security footage, the lobby, herself, and Marcus kissing. I watched her watch herself kiss him. The knife fell from her hand and clattered against the granite countertop. "That's not," she started. "Don't," I said. My voice was so cold that she actually flinched. "Don't lie. I've seen the emails, I've seen the accounts, I've seen the forged signatures. I've seen the properties in my name that I never bought, money in accounts I never opened. $4.8 million, Stephanie. That's how much you and Marcus Chen and Douglas Webb stole from me." Her face went white. She gripped the counter behind her with both hands, and I realized she was trembling. But I didn't feel sympathy. I felt something else, something crystalline and sharp and dangerous. "We were going to tell you," she whispered. "Were you?" I asked. "When? After you'd disappeared? After you'd cleaned out everything and left me to find out from the IRS or the SEC or whoever came knocking?" "Marcus, You don't get to explain," I said. "You don't get to make this about me not paying attention or not appreciating you or any of the other things you've probably been telling yourself. You made a choice. You chose theft. You chose to betray me. You chose to spend the last 18 months lying to my face while you systematically stole everything I built. I set my phone on the counter. My attorney is filing fraud charges tomorrow. You're going to have 48 hours to get a lawyer and decide whether you're going to cooperate or whether you want to go down with Marcus and Douglas Webb. The choice is yours. But either way, you're done. This house, these cars, that credit card you've been using, it all stops now. She opened her mouth, and I held up my hand. You have one question. One. Ask it. What about us? She asked, her voice breaking. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I didn't recognize the person standing in my kitchen. The woman I'd married, the woman I'd thought I knew, had been replaced by a stranger. Or maybe the stranger had been there all along, and I'd just been too blind to see her. There is no us, I said. There never was. You were just waiting for the right moment to take what you could and run. I turned and walked out of the kitchen. Behind me, I heard her start to cry, but I didn't stop. The next 72 hours were a blur of legal paperwork, phone calls, and strategy sessions. Richard Castellano moved with the efficiency of a man who had fought 1,000 wars. By Friday morning, the charges had been filed. By Friday afternoon, Marcus Chen had been arrested at his apartment in Brooklyn. By Saturday, he'd lawyered up and refused to cooperate. By Sunday, Stephanie had done the same. But Douglas Webb? Douglas Webb broke within 6 hours of being questioned by the FBI. He gave up everything: the account numbers, the forged signatures, the payment schedule, the whole infrastructure of the scheme. In exchange for a lighter sentence, he agreed to testify against both Stephanie and Marcus. He also gave up something else, the name of the lawyer who'd set it all up, a man named Gerald Strack, who specialized in financial crimes and had worked for people much worse than my wife. I didn't attend the hearings. I couldn't stand to be in the same room as Stephanie, to hear her voice or see her face. Instead, I threw myself into the work of rebuilding. The company had been shaken by the news that our CFO was a criminal, but we stabilized. I promoted our second-in-command, a woman named Keisha Williams who'd been with us for 5 years and whom I should have trusted from the beginning. I commissioned an external audit of all accounts. I restructured our financial oversight, and I started looking at real estate again. Not for a house, but for something else. It took 8 months. 8 months of meetings with brokers, accountants, and venture capitalists. 8 months of learning the banking industry from the inside. 8 months of what I can only describe as obsession, though Richard Castellano called it strategy. You're sure about this? He asked me one afternoon in his office, sliding a document across the desk toward me. I looked at it, a letter of intent to purchase a controlling stake in Pinnacle Bank. 51% of the shares, $137 million. I'd liquidated the fraudulent properties, recovered what I could from Stephanie's offshore accounts, and used my company's profits to make up the difference. It was legal. It was possible. It was, by any reasonable measure, insane. I'm sure, I said. Why? Richard asked. You have the money. You could do literally anything with it. Why this? I thought about Douglas Webb, standing at the teller window, telling me I couldn't withdraw my own money. I thought about the look on his face, the way he'd assumed I was lying, that a black man in a suit couldn't possibly have $500 in a bank account. I thought about all the times in my life when people had doubted me, dismissed me, assumed the worst about me because of the color of my skin. Because they need to learn, I said. They need to learn that you can't treat people like they're invisible. You can't steal from them and think there won't be consequences. And they need to learn it from someone they never expected. The acquisition closed on a Tuesday in December. I walked into the offices of Pinnacle Bank with a team of accountants and security personnel, handed the current board of directors a letter, and took a seat in the executive conference room. The new CEO, a woman I'd hired from J.P. Morgan Chase, was already moving through the building, informing staff of the change in ownership. Douglas Webb was in his office, packing his personal items into a cardboard box, his security badge already deactivated. I didn't confront him. I didn't need to. Instead, I made one simple announcement. Effective immediately, all non-compliant accounts will be reviewed. All employees involved in facilitating fraudulent transactions will be terminated, and their records will be forwarded to the appropriate federal agencies. Thank you for your service to Pinnacle Bank. It took 3 minutes for the announcement to spread through the building. It took 5 minutes for Douglas Webb to realize what had happened. And it took 7 minutes for him to understand that his career in banking was over. I watched from the window of the executive suite as he walked out of the building, the cardboard box under his arm, his face the color of ash. A month later, I received a phone call. It was my attorney, Richard Castellano. "Stephanie took a plea deal," he said. "6 years in federal prison. Marcus got 8. Strack, the lawyer, he's looking at 10 to 15. And Douglas Webb? The SEC is investigating him for racketeering. He'll probably go away for longer than any of them." "Good," I said. "Marcus also wanted me to tell you something," Richard continued. "He said to tell you that he was sorry, that he knew it didn't matter, but he wanted you to know." I didn't respond. Apologies from thieves don't change anything. They don't recover what was stolen. They don't restore what was broken. After I hung up, I sat in my new office at Pinnacle Bank. My office, in the building that now belonged to me. And I thought about power. I thought about how it felt to have everything taken from me, and then to take everything back. I thought about how the same bank that had denied me $500 now answering to me. How the same man who had looked at my ID with suspicion now had to face the consequences of his assumptions. But as I sat there, watching the Manhattan skyline begin to glow as the sun set, I realized something. The money had come back. The justice had been served. But something else, something I couldn't quite name, hadn't returned. The trust I'd had in people, the belief that the world was fundamentally fair, the assumption that if you worked hard and played by the rules, things would work out. Those things were gone, and I didn't think they were coming back. I pulled out my phone and texted Keisha Williams, "Come by my office tomorrow at 9. I want to discuss succession planning. I'm thinking about stepping back." She responded immediately, "You sure? You just bought a bank." I looked out at the city lights and typed back, "I'm sure. I've spent the last year proving something. I think I've proven it enough." The next morning, I signed the papers that would make Keisha the CEO of my consulting firm. The papers that would transfer control of my legacy to someone I trusted, someone who'd earned it, someone who would protect it the way I never had. And then I did something I hadn't done in years. I went home early. The house was quiet. I'd kept it, had considered selling it 100 times, but in the end, I decided that letting Stephanie drive me away from it would be one more victory for her, and I wasn't in the business of giving her victories anymore. I poured myself a glass of water and sat on the terrace overlooking the pool. And for the first time in months, I didn't think about money or revenge or justice. I just sat there, breathing, and let myself feel the weight of everything that had happened. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother, Gloria's voice coming through the screen. "Baby, you coming to Sunday dinner? I'm making your favorite." I smiled despite myself. Gloria. My mother-in-law, or rather my ex-mother-in-law, though she'd called me 3 times a week since the arrest, asking if I was eating right, if I was sleeping, if I needed anything. She'd been the one who'd noticed something was wrong, back when I was still pretending everything was fine. She'd asked me questions I didn't want to answer. She'd known. "I'll be there," I texted back. That Sunday, I sat at my mother-in-law's kitchen table, the same kitchen where Stephanie and I had eaten dinner what felt like a lifetime ago, though it had only been a year. Gloria served jerk chicken and rice and peas, and we talked about normal things. The weather, her garden, a new show she was watching. She didn't ask about Stephanie, and I appreciated that. She didn't ask how I was coping or what I was thinking. She just cooked and listened and made sure my glass was never empty. "Your father called me," she said as I was leaving. "He's very proud of you." "Dad's been dead for 15 years, I said gently. "I know," Gloria said. She squeezed my hand. "But he's still proud. From wherever he is, he's proud that his son didn't break, that you fought back, that you won." I didn't know if she was right. I wasn't sure what winning looked like anymore. But I hugged her, and I meant it. 6 months after I took over Pinnacle Bank, I stood in the same marble lobby where Jennifer the teller had denied me a $500 withdrawal. The lobby looked different now. We'd renovated it. New marble, new lighting, new everything. And I'd made one specific change. We'd removed Douglas Webb's portrait from the wall where it had hung for 15 years. In its place, we'd hung a portrait of my mother. It wasn't her face, it was a painting of her hands, capable, strong hands, the hands that had cleaned other people's houses to put food on my table, the hands that had taught me to believe in myself when nobody else did. The plaque beneath it read, "To those whose labor built this place, whose dreams made it possible, whose dignity demands respect." I stood there alone, looking at my mother's hands, and I realized that I'd finally stopped being angry. Not because the anger wasn't justified, it was, but because anger had served its purpose. It had pushed me to fight, it had pushed me to win, and now that I'd won, it was time to let it go. My phone buzzed. A message from Richard Castellano. "Just heard. Stephanie's appeal was denied. She serves out her full sentence. Also, Marcus Chen is requesting a transfer to a prison in Ohio. Wants to be closer to his mother. She's sick." I read the message twice. I thought about Marcus, sitting in a cell, unable to help his mother because of the choices he'd made. I thought about Stephanie, spending her 30s and 40s in federal prison, watching her life happen on the outside through letters and phone calls. I thought about Douglas Webb, permanently blacklisted from every financial institution in the country, his career and reputation destroyed. And I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no regret. Just the quiet understanding that justice, when it finally comes, doesn't feel the way you think it will. I turned away from the portrait and walked through the lobby of my bank, past the tellers and the customers, out into the New York sunshine. And for the first time since I'd discovered what Stephanie had done, I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost. I was thinking about what I'd found.